There are moments in television that feel rehearsed, even when they're spontaneous. And then there are moments so raw, so unrehearsed, that everyone watching knows something has shifted. October 1991. Don Rickles walked onto the Tonight Show stage for what would become his final appearance with Johnny Carson. The audience expected the usual: sharp insults, rapid-fire jabs, laughter that filled every corner of Studio One in Burbank. What they got instead was something nobody had prepared for. Not the producers, not the band, not even Johnny himself. Rickles had been a fixture on The Tonight Show for nearly 3 decades. He'd appeared more than 100 times. His relationship with Johnny wasn't just professional, it was familial in the way only decades of shared stages can create. Every appearance followed a rhythm. Rickles would walk out, insult Johnny's suit, his hair, his Midwestern roots. Johnny would smile that controlled smile, the one that said he was in on the joke, always had been. The audience would roar. It was theater, but it was also real. That tension between performance and authenticity was what made it work. But that night in October, something was different. You couldn't point to it at first. The set looked the same. Doc Severinsen and the band played Rickles out with their usual energy. Johnny stood, shook his hand, gestured to the guest chair with that familiar sweep of his arm. Rickles sat down, adjusted his jacket, looked at Johnny with that mischievous grin that had become his trademark. Everything seemed normal. And yet, for those who knew how to watch Johnny Carson, really watch him, there was a heaviness in his posture, a slowness in the way he settled back into his chair. The insults started right away. Rickles didn't waste time. "Johnny, I've been doing your show for 30 years, and I still can't figure out how you got this job. You're from Nebraska. Nebraska. They grow corn there, not television hosts." The audience laughed. Johnny smiled, tilted his head slightly, the way he always did when Rickles was warming up. "And that suit," Rickles continued, "did Ed McMahon pick that out for you? It looks like you're going to a funeral for someone who hated you." More laughter. Johnny's smile widened, but his eyes stayed steady, calm. He'd heard 1,000 variations of these jokes. He could do this in his sleep. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that's what made it safe. Predictable. A ritual they'd perfected over decades. Rickles kept going. He turned to the audience. "This man makes $20 million a year to sit behind a desk and pretend he's interested in what celebrities have to say. Meanwhile, I'm out here doing 4 shows a night in Vegas just to pay my mortgage." The crowd roared. Johnny laughed, a real laugh this time, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. For a moment it felt like every other appearance. 2 old pros doing what they did best. But then Rickles paused. Just for a second. He looked at Johnny, not at the host, not at the persona, but at the man. And something in his face changed. The smile was still there, but it softened. His shoulders dropped slightly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. The audience was still laughing from the previous joke, but Rickles wasn't laughing anymore. "You know, Johnny," he said, quieter now, "I've been thinking about something." His voice had lost its sharp edge. It was conversational, intimate even, the kind of tone you don't usually hear on late-night television. Johnny's expression shifted. The smile faded, replaced by something more open, curious, maybe a little guarded. "What's that, Don?" Johnny asked. His voice was gentle. He knew Rickles well enough to know when the performance was about to crack. Rickles looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up at Johnny. "I've been doing this a long time. You've been doing this even longer, and I've been on a lot of shows, a lot of stages, but this one..." He trailed off, gestured vaguely at the set around them. The studio was quieter now. The audience sensed the shift. They weren't sure what was happening, but they knew it wasn't part of the script. Johnny didn't move. He just watched Rickles, waiting. "I've insulted you on this show more than I've insulted my own wife," Rickles continued. "And she's heard some doozies, let me tell you." A few scattered laughs, but mostly silence. "But the thing is, Johnny, you never took it personally. Not once. You always knew it was the game. You knew I loved you." Johnny's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in restraint. He was holding something back. The camera stayed on him, but he didn't look at it. He only looked at Rickles. "I know, Don," Johnny said quietly. Rickles nodded. "Good, because I need you to know that. I need everyone to know that." He turned to the audience. This man right here, he's the best there ever was. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting on his couch. I'm saying it because it's true. The audience started to applaud, but Rickles held up a hand. Wait, I'm not done. The applause stopped. Johnny, you're stepping down soon. I know you haven't announced when, but we all know it's coming. And I don't know if I'll get another chance to sit here with you like this, so I'm going to say something I should have said a long time ago. Johnny leaned back slightly in his chair. His face was unreadable now. That mask he wore so well, the one that kept his private self hidden from millions of viewers, was firmly in place. But his hands, resting on the armrests of his chair, were gripping just a little too tightly. You made my career, Rickles said. His voice cracked, just barely. I was doing nightclubs, barely getting by, and you put me on this show. You gave me a platform. You made people laugh at me instead of just tolerating me, and I never properly thanked you for that. The silence in the studio was complete now. Even the band seemed frozen. Doc Severinsen, who'd seen thousands of Tonight Show moments, looked stunned. Ed McMahon, off to the side, had stopped smiling entirely. His usual jovial expression was gone, replaced by something softer, sadder. Johnny cleared his throat. Don, you don't have to. Yeah, I do, Rickles interrupted. Because after you're gone, this place won't be the same. Television won't be the same, and I won't be the same. He paused, looked down again. When he looked back up, his eyes were wet. So thank you, Johnny, for everything, for 30 years of letting me insult you, for laughing when I bombed, for being the kind of man who doesn't need to prove how important he is, because everyone already knows. The audience was completely still. Some were crying. You could see it in the front rows, tissues coming out of purses, hands wiping eyes. This wasn't what they'd come for. They'd come for jokes, for lightness, for the escape that late-night television always promised. Instead, they were witnessing something far more fragile. Two men, both in the twilight of their careers, acknowledging what was about to be lost. Johnny didn't speak right away. He looked at Rickles for a long moment. Then he looked down at his desk. His fingers drummed once, twice against the wood, a nervous habit he'd had for years. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, but there was emotion underneath it, barely contained. Don, he stopped, swallowed, started again. You've been one of the great joys of doing this show. Every time you walked out here, I knew we were going to have fun. I knew you were going to make me laugh, and that's not something you can fake. That's real. Rickles nodded. He wasn't smiling anymore. Neither was Johnny. I'm going to miss this, Johnny continued. I'm going to miss you walking out here and calling me a talentless hack. A few quiet laughs from the audience. Johnny's mouth twitched into a small smile. But more than that, I'm going to miss knowing that you'll be out there somewhere, doing what you do, making people laugh, being Don Rickles. I'll still be out there, Johnny, Rickles said. I'm not going anywhere, but it won't be the same without this. Without you. Johnny looked away from Rickles then, out at the audience. His face was composed, but his eyes betrayed him. They were red-rimmed, glassy. He took a breath. We have to go to commercial, he said, his voice a little too steady, too controlled. But he didn't signal for the commercial. Not yet. He just sat there looking at Rickles, and Rickles looking back at him. Two men who'd spent their lives performing, now stripped of the performance, just themselves. Vulnerable, human. Finally, Johnny raised his hand. The stage manager cued the break. The cameras pulled back. The red lights went off. And in that brief moment before the studio lights shifted, before the audience started murmuring, before the machinery of television kicked back into gear, Johnny leaned forward. He reached out his hand. Rickles took it. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. When they came back from commercial, the tone had shifted again. Rickles told a few more jokes. Johnny laughed. They talked about Rickles' upcoming shows in Vegas. They fell back into the rhythm they knew, the safe rhythm, the one that didn't ask too much of either of them. But everyone watching knew what they'd just witnessed. It wasn't just an appearance. It was a goodbye. Rickles and Johnny had first met in the early 1960s. Rickles was a nobody then, a nightclub comedian with a brutal style that most people didn't understand. He insulted audiences. He mocked celebrities. He took everything sacred and made it profane. It was dangerous comedy. the kind that could get you punched or blacklisted. But Johnny saw something in it. He saw the intelligence underneath the insults, the precision, the fearlessness. When Johnny took over The Tonight Show in 1962, Rickles was one of his early guests. The appearance was chaotic. Rickles insulted Johnny's tie, his desk, his questions. He told the audience Johnny looked like a choir boy who'd wandered into the wrong profession. Johnny laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. At the end of the segment, as Rickles was walking off, Johnny called after him, "Come back anytime, Don." Rickles did. Again and again. Over the years, their relationship deepened. It wasn't just professional. They understood each other in a way that went beyond comedy. Both men knew what it was like to perform under immense pressure. Both knew the loneliness that came with success. Both had built walls around themselves, Rickles with insults, Johnny with control, and those walls made them effective, but they also made them isolated. On stage, they could drop those walls. Just a little. Just enough. Rickles could say things to Johnny he couldn't say to anyone else because they were framed as jokes, and Johnny could respond with honesty because it was under the guise of banter. It was a strange intimacy, one built on laughter, but rooted in something deeper. By the late 1980s, both men were aging. Rickles was still performing, still sharp, but the industry was changing. The comedy that had made him famous, the insult comedy, the rapid-fire mockery, was falling out of favor. Younger comedians were more self-deprecating, more ironic. Rickles' style felt like a relic from another era. He knew it, even if he didn't say it out loud. Johnny, meanwhile, was preparing to leave. He'd been hosting The Tonight Show for nearly 3 decades. He'd interviewed thousands of guests, delivered tens of thousands of monologue jokes, sat through countless commercial breaks and band performances and celebrity anecdotes. He was tired, not in a way that showed on camera. Johnny was too disciplined for that, but in a way that those close to him could see. He was ready to stop performing, ready to stop being Johnny Carson and just be John. But leaving meant endings. It meant final appearances, final interviews, final goodbyes. And for someone like Johnny, who'd spent his entire career avoiding overt sentimentality, those endings were excruciating. The thing about The Tonight Show was that it had always been about control. Johnny controlled the pace, the tone, the mood. He controlled when to laugh, when to pivot, when to cut to commercial. He was a master of timing, not just comedic timing, but emotional timing. He knew how to keep an audience engaged without ever giving too much of himself away. But control only works when you can maintain it. And by 1991, Johnny was losing his grip. Not on the show. He was still as sharp as ever professionally, but on his emotions, on his ability to keep the walls up. Rickles' appearance forced those walls down, not intentionally. Rickles wasn't trying to make Johnny cry or break character. He was just being honest. And honesty in a medium built on performance is devastating. When Rickles said, "You made my career," he wasn't exaggerating. It was the literal truth. Johnny had the power to make or break comedians with a single Tonight Show appearance. If Johnny laughed at your jokes, if he invited you to sit on the couch after your set, if he asked you back, your career exploded. If he didn't, you faded into obscurity. Rickles knew this. Everyone knew this. But it was rarely spoken aloud. It was one of those industry truths that lived in the background, unacknowledged. By saying it out loud, Rickles was acknowledging the power dynamic that had always existed between them. But he was also transcending it. He wasn't thanking Johnny as a supplicant, thanking a king. He was thanking him as one human being, thanking another. And that shift from professional gratitude to personal gratitude was what made the moment so overwhelming. Johnny didn't know how to respond to it. He'd been thanked before, countless times, by guests, by colleagues, by fans, but those thanks were always performative, always part of the show. This was different. This was real. And Johnny, for all his skill, had never been comfortable with real. After the commercial break, they finished the segment. Rickles told a story about performing in Vegas. Johnny asked questions. They laughed. The audience laughed. On the surface, everything was normal again. But underneath, something had broken. Or maybe not broken, maybe opened. A door that had always been closed was now briefly ajar. When the show ended, when the cameras stopped rolling, Johnny and Rickles stayed on stage for a moment. The audience was filing out. The crew was beginning to break down the set. Doc and the band were packing up their instruments, and in the middle of it all, Johnny and Rickles stood facing each other. "That was something, Don," Johnny said quietly. "Yeah," Rickles replied. "It was." They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands again. They just stood there, two men in expensive suits, surrounded by the detritus of a television show, acknowledging what they both knew. This was it. Not just the end of an appearance, the end of an era. Rickles left first. He waved to the crew, made a joke about the lighting guy, and walked off stage. Johnny watched him go. Then he turned and walked back to his dressing room. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't stop to chat with producers or crew members, just went straight to his room and closed the door. Johnny Carson retired from The Tonight Show on May 22, 1992, 7 months after Rickles' final appearance. His last show was watched by 50 million people. It was filled with clips, tributes, celebrity guests, but there was no sentimentality from Johnny himself. He thanked the crew, thanked the audience, and said goodbye with the same controlled grace he'd shown for 30 years. But those who'd been watching closely, who'd seen the Rickles appearance and the other quiet moments that preceded the finale, knew that Johnny had already said his real goodbyes, not on the last show, but in those smaller, unplanned moments when the performance cracked and the man underneath was briefly visible. Don Rickles continued performing for another 26 years. He toured. He did occasional TV appearances. He remained, until the very end, Don Rickles, sharp, fearless, unapologetically himself. But he never appeared on The Tonight Show again. There was no Tonight Show to appear on, not the one that mattered, not Johnny's. When Rickles died in 2017, the tributes poured in. Comedians, actors, fans, all shared their memories of the man who'd insulted them into loving him. But one of the most telling tributes came from someone who'd worked on The Tonight Show during those final years. Don and Johnny understood each other. They said they both knew what it cost to make people laugh, and they both knew when to stop pretending it didn't cost anything. The footage of that October 1991 appearance still exists. You can find it if you look hard enough. It's been uploaded to YouTube, shared on social media, discussed in articles about Johnny Carson's legacy. People watch it and see different things. Some see two old friends saying goodbye. Some see the end of a certain kind of television, the kind that valued craft over spectacle, intimacy over virality. Some just see two men, tired and human, dropping their masks for a few minutes. But what everyone sees, whether they can articulate it or not, is the moment when Don Rickles stopped being a comedian and became just Don. And the moment when Johnny Carson stopped being a host and became just Johnny. Two men who'd spent decades performing, finally allowing themselves to simply be. The room went silent because there was nothing left to say. No joke could follow that honesty. No punchline could diffuse that weight. All that was left was the truth. Everything ends, every show, every career, every friendship, and pretending otherwise doesn't change it. Johnny knew that. Rickles knew that. And for one brief moment on national television, they let the rest of us know it too.